Gospel according to Luke. Glory to you, O Lord. Now, about 8 days after these sayings, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, and went up on the mountain to pray. And while he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly they saw two men, Moses and Elijah, talking to him. They appeared in glory and were speaking of his departure, which he was about to accomplish in Jerusalem. Now Peter and his companions were weighed down with sleep, but since they had stayed awake, they saw his glory and the two men who stood with him. Just as they were leaving him, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwelling places, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah," not knowing what he had said. While he was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were terrified as they entered the cloud. Then from the cloud came a voice that said, "This is my Son, the beloved one. Listen to him." When the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone, and they kept silent, and in those days told no one of the things they had seen. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Transformers, transfusion, transportation, translation, transcendent, transfix, transaction, transfer, transfat, transubstantiation. That's one I won't even try to explain today. Have you ever noticed how many words begin with the word trans? In my trusty old Webster's dictionary, 111 trans words fill up nearly 4 pages. The word trans, referring to people who identify as transgender, has been in the news a lot lately. The governor of Iowa signed a new law just this week, removing civil rights protections for transgender Iowans. Because of a decree that went out from the president, people who are transgender are now unable to get passports that match their gender identity. The negative rhetoric about trans athletes has increased dramatically in the past month. Our transgender siblings, friends, and family, and members of this church are experiencing a heightened sense of fear and intimidation, and are worried that their identities are being erased. My heart has been aching for many reasons recently, but especially so for my colleague, for my brother's children, and many, many friends who are trans. And then we come to this Transfiguration Sunday, and I can't help but make the connection. Trans comes from the Greek word metamorpho, as in metamorphosis, meaning change. Jesus was transformed on that mountain, changed somehow, though not exactly clear how he was changed, besides his dazzling white clothes. Sounds a little trans to me, but... A number of years ago, I asked a friend who identifies as transgender to reflect with me about the transition from a female identity to a male one. For much of his life, people referred to him as a girl, and his outward appearance reflected what people expected for girls. He wore dresses and pigtails. He played with dolls. He even dated boys. But as an adult, he began to change his outward appearance to reflect what people expected for men. He changed his name. He grew facial hair, and he began to use male pronouns. When I asked him about these changes and what the prefix trans means to him, he said, "The thing is, I don't feel like I've changed at all. The transitioning let my true self be made known and seen by others. This is who I have been all along." And then he said, "Transitioning affected the people around me much more than it affected me. They were the ones who had to change their ideas and their assumptions and their prejudices about gender. This dramatic change and powerful transformation for him were about revealing his true identity, not changing it. And in turn, the people around him were changed too. We had our assumptions about him challenged and readjusted. Some were able to stay with him through the transition and revelation and change, and others just couldn't make any sense of it at all. They were afraid because everything that they thought they knew about him had changed. Imagine with me now Peter, James, and John climbing up that mountain with Jesus, their friend and teacher, talking about life and what the future might hold for them, when suddenly he is transfigured, changed, and they too were terrified. Traditionally, this transfiguration event is understood as a moment when Jesus reveals his divinity. He's not changed from human to divine, but the disciples see for the first time that Jesus is both human and divine. Jesus' true self was now known and seen by others, perhaps for the first time. Everything that they thought they knew about him had changed in that moment. Assumptions about him and about their future were challenged and readjusted. It's no wonder that they were terrified. Most of us don't really like change, do we? But their lives and their understanding of Jesus were transformed on that mountaintop too. They didn't stay on the mountaintop, though the disciples wanted to, but they transitioned back down the mountain into the mundane, everyday life, down to the nitty-gritty of misunderstanding and squabbling and disbelieving. They entered back into the religious and political quarrels of the day, back down to the poverty and pain that are part and parcel of our life in this world. And so we remember that as Jesus comes back down the mountain, ready to enter our gritty world on our behalf, he also enters into our brokenness and fear, into our disappointment and loss. The very heart of the Christian faith is that the Holy One who is revealed on the mountaintop is also the human one with us in the plains and valleys. Christ is with us and for us in the midst of suffering and fears experienced in the valleys of life. Christ is with us and for us so that we might not simply persist, but flourish, not simply have life, but have it abundantly, that we might understand that the God who created us and sustains the cosmos not only knows that we exist, but cares. Cares about our ups and downs, cares about our hopes and disappointments, cares about our dreams, cares about our despair, cares about all the things that we care about, promising to be with us, to walk alongside us, and to never let us go. Just as that voice from heaven announced Jesus as the beloved one, we too are transformed and named beloved in our baptism. We are made new in the light and love of Christ, and we are invited to let the light of Christ shine through us in our prayers, in our giving, through our acts of mercy and compassion, our acts of justice and resistance, so that others too may see that we are changed by the glory of God in us. Bishop Desmond Tutu from South Africa admonishes us to live a transformed life, saying, God places us in a world as his fellow workers, agents of transfiguration. We work with God so that injustice is transfigured into justice. So there will be more compassion and caring, that there will be more laughter and joy, that there will be more togetherness in God's world. In this meal and in the waters of baptism, we are transformed to live life anew, confident in the one who transforms us from the inside out. Amen.